Welcome to the Gentle Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Donegan. I'm a midwife, mom, and founder of Gentle Birth. Join me each week to hear inspiring, uplifting birth stories, learn helpful tips, and get advice from parents and professionals supporting you on your journey to parenthood. Your positive birth begins here. In this week's podcast, we meet Brenda Baar, a Michigan-based birth doula, to talk about the benefits of having a doula at your baby's birth. We'll also chat about why Brenda became a doula, and for any listeners interested in training to become a doula, we'll also share some tips. Welcome to the Gentle Birth Podcast. Today I'd like to introduce you to Brenda Baar from Michigan, and Brenda is a DONA certified doula. And today we're going to talk a little about the benefits of having a doula, what are the benefits of having one, what they cost, and a little bit about the work of a doula. So maybe you're considering becoming a doula. Brenda's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Welcome, Brenda.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you, where you're based, and about your family and how you got into doula work.
Sure. My family, my husband and I have been married for 12 years. And we have 3 kids. Owen and Carter are identical twins, 9.5, and our daughter, Clara, is 6. We live in West Michigan, about 30 minutes west of Grand Rapids, which is the second largest city in Michigan. And that's where most of my market is, where most of my clients are. But we live really close to Lake Michigan. For anyone who has never been, it looks like the ocean. In the middle of the summer, it might as well be, except for no salt, but it's a really lovely place to live.
So tell us, first of all, before you tell us about how you got into this work, if you met somebody in the street today and you told them what you do, how would you describe it? What is a birth doula?
I have different answers for this question depending on how long I have. So if I have someone who, if I know I have half a second and that's it, my answer is it's like a birth coach. If I have a little longer, I say it's kind of I kind of give the standard answer. So I often say it's an old role, but a newer profession. Essentially, what I do is provide continuous support for my clients during labor, usually from about the early labor, the beginning of active labor, all the way through until the baby's born and a couple hours after. So that includes informational, physical, and emotional support. Now, when I have even more time, for example, at a consult, maybe with a potential client, I like to go into what that actually means, because I think for someone who's never worked with a doula, it can be kind of hard to grasp what that means. So physical support and informational support are easy to explain. And physical support would be massage or counter pressure, physical support that can make labor more comfortable, but also suggestions of different positions that can make labor progress, coping easier. And then informational support, I think, is also kind of easy to understand. If you don't know your options, you don't have any. So as a birth doula who's, I've been doing this for about 5 years. It's been 5 years today since my DONA training.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Having been to many births, I have a unique perspective on what my clients' options are. So I can help them know what their options are and how to ask for it. I can help them, know kind of, what's out there, good questions to ask so they get all the information that they need. And also, I really enjoy the educational component of being a birth doula. I was originally an elementary school teacher, so I've always been a teacher. But I really like helping my clients kind of pointing out this is what's happening and this is what it means, and so they can kind of understand the process really well and kind of feel less anxious due to that. So, but I think what's kind of the hardest to understand for people who haven't worked with a doula before is the emotional support. And I think that's because culturally, emotional support is not much of a value. I think a lot of people like to be tough and think they don't need it. So when I explain emotional support to people, I sometimes kind of see their eyes glaze over like, oh, okay, maybe that's for someone else, not me. But I find that once I've worked with my clients, once they've had their baby, that is what they say that's why we hired our doula, for that emotional support. I think it helps so much having someone who is, mostly, I say objective, I don't want to say cold. Of course, I'm not totally objective because I care about my clients, but more objective and not a non-anxious presence with them continuously, I think really helps to bring down that anxiety for both the birthing person and the partner. I have had dad say several times, when this happened, I was kind of freaking out. And I looked over at Brenda and she's just sitting there all calm. And I'm like, okay, if Brenda's not freaking out, I guess I can stay calm and know that really helps my clients have a more enjoyable experience with less anxiety. So I guess that's my answer of what a short, medium, and long answer of what a birth doula is.
If you were my doula, when would you come to support me? Do I have to wait until I'm at the hospital, or would you come to my home?
I tell my clients, bottom line, when you feel like you need my support, I'm there. But I also tell them I like more information than less. There's not a, threshold of information they have to meet before they touch base with me. I meet my clients when they need me, when they're feeling like they need external support. And usually that means towards the end of early labor, beginning of active labor. But prior to that, I give a lot of support over the phone and over text that I know helps them feel a lot more comfortable laboring at home. That's where most of them are at the beginning, unless it's an induction, of course. And also, I should say, I have almost all my clients birth in the hospital. So I've had a few home births. But anyway, I know that just that encouragement over the phone of like, yes, it's super normal for contractions to come and go. Even though they're strong, they're 6-7 minutes apart. So often that means that you're still early, but kind of helping them look at the whole picture. Many first-time moms end up going to, like Tracy, going to the hospital too early. But thankfully, that's not very common with my clients. And I know that's because they have that early labor support, even though I'm not with them yet. So I will, like I said, bottom line, if they're feeling like they need my support, I am there. Otherwise, we kind of decide together over the phone when's the right time for me to come. And sometimes that's at home and we labor at home for a little while. And then, I accompany them over to the hospital when it's time to go, when they're feeling ready. And then especially with my clients who've had babies before, when it kind of kicks in a lot faster, what will happen is they'll be ready for me and I'll be halfway there, and then I'll get a phone call that's like, well, why don't you just meet us at the hospital? Oftentimes that happens too. So
a question that I often hear and comments that I'll see online as well is, I'm going to have a nurse with me, so why would I need another, what's considered a stranger in the room?
Sure.
Won't my nurse do everything that you do? So can you tell our listeners, what's the difference between having the nurse and having a doula, and do they complement each other?
Well, yes, to answer that question, I believe. If you imagine a Venn diagram of the role of a nurse and the role of a doula, there is some similarity. There's, some overlap. They can both provide that informational, physical, and emotional support. So, they're at times, but there's a lot that's different. Some things that a doula will do that a nurse can't is, for example, right off the bat, your nurse isn't going to meet you at home and help you, labor there until it's time to go to the hospital. Also, there is the uncertainty of who your nurse is going to be. Where I work, most of the nurses are amazing and most of my clients have amazing nurses, but it's just a possibility. It is, of course, a possibility that you will get someone that maybe you don't mesh with, that you don't feel comfortable with. So having a doula that that you've met with prior to labor offers some security, someone that you can depend on. Also, at the labor, the nurse is not able to give continuous support like a doula can give. A nurse may have other patients. They have tons of charting to do. So they're going to be in and out. Depending on your nurse, you may have a nurse that does offer more support in the room. But depending on their workload and their personality, that's something that's uncertain.
That's such an important point, and one thing that I try to explain to parents as often as I can, and there was a really great study, a randomized control trial that was done a couple of years back, looking at how much time an obstetric nurse has to actually provide that not just the clinical care, but the comfort and nurturing support in the room with parents, especially if she has other patients that she's looking after. Mm-hmm. And I think it averaged out that of a 12-hour shift, it could be as little as 6% of that 12 hours to 24%. So when I roughly did the math, in a 12-hour shift, if it was at the low end around 6%, that works out at only 42 minutes.
Yeah,
which
that sounds right. Yeah,
astounding. And this is not for any of our listeners who are nurses or midwives. That is not to say that you don't want to provide that care, but lack of resources and a busy L&D means that their time is just they're spread so thinly. And the part of the work that for most nurses and midwives that go into this work, it's the doula part of the work that we enjoy the most. Yeah. But we have the least amount of time for. And for me, particularly when I'm talking to dads about this or birth partners, that when they realize that when you're going into the hospital environment that you're it. So you may not have someone with you for the majority of your laboring time. Dad is the person that has to remember, all of the comfort measures and what they learned in classes. And I think the doula just takes all of that pressure off the birth partner so they can be as engaged to their comfort level and really enjoy the experience much more as well. Do you find that with the dads that you work with?
Yes, and actually that's something that you reminded me of, something that I often will say to birth partners and dads. As a gentle birth educator and a teacher, I think there's so much value in educating yourself and in information. However, there is, like you said, there is that pressure to, keep all of that information at the forefront of your brain, and then for the first time ever, be able to apply what you have learned perfectly. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. So I tell my partners that I'm kind of like your birth encyclopedia, very warm one, but, with you, that when you need, even though you have that valuable information, that I can help you apply it really well. So, and of course dads need a lot of support too. But I've said before, like, when have you learned everything, about a skill or something and then applied it perfectly the first time you've tried it, Never, so having a doula, I know for my husband, we had a doula for our daughter. He just felt so much more confident having someone who's done it a lot to give him guidance of, this is what's going to work.
I think as well that you get one chance to birth this baby and you don't want to mess it up. So I think for the partners to really educate themselves as much as possible and to a point where they feel capable and confident on the day with that extra support, because hospitals can be anxiety-provoking places. Most of us don't like being in a hospital as a patient. So when you're the go-to person and you're it and you're left alone with your partner and you don't know what is normal and maybe your partner is making sounds that you haven't heard before, that it can be quite scary for the partners. And then of course mom is looking to the partner to be that person. And I think for the longest time, we have sidelined the partners in maternity services and really haven't engaged with them to help them feel capable and confident supporting their partners. So I think my own experience as a doula as well is just to really see those partners step into their confidence and really feel that they can participate in a meaningful way on the day. And you definitely see how a partner that's well engaged and well informed, how it can impact their relationship, because this is such a pivotal moment in their relationship. And if mom feels that she has her birth team, all working together and her partner is there by her side, that if he can't fulfill or she can't fulfill that role, I think it can sometimes have a detrimental effect to their relationship moving into parenthood.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. I have really enjoyed it when I can tell that a dad's feeling really, at the beginning, feeling really nervous, like, how do I help? And then as he kind of observes me doing a few different, things or saying different kinds of affirmations, just watching him kind of relax and then maybe start kind of saying some of those things that, repeating some of the encouragement that I've been giving. I really love watching women feel empowered, but also their partners feel empowered in that role too. And I've heard people say like, oh, we just really want this to be an intimate experience, and like having a doula would take away from that. And my argument is, I think you can't have an intimate experience if you're really anxious. And I feel like I can help my clients have that. So for example, I will have a client, in the tub, and I can tell he's feeling much more comfortable in his role. And I'll just say, I'm going to, give you guys a little bit of time. I'm going to just be outside the door and go sit on the couch and just let me know if you need me. And they know I'm there, and sometimes they'll call me like, oh, something different's happening, but I can tell, I think that even having that quote unquote extra person in the room can make it even more of a special, intimate experience. But also what I was going to say about another thing I like to frame it with partners is back to just that idea of trying to keep all that information, at the top of your brain and to use it really well. I think that causes a lot of anxiety. And what I like to do, and what I've witnessed, is partners, when they're able to kind of relinquish that anxiety of like, I have to do this right, and I have to remember all this, they're able to kind of like what you were saying, like come down to a more relaxed, connected level and support their partner and meet their baby from a more like personal, non-anxious level. So I just think it's very beautiful.
I think they can be present, because otherwise their mind is going, as we know, in a million different directions. And once that pressure is off to be all things to your partner on that special day, that it's like, I can participate in a way that feels good for me and that my partner will appreciate. And having that doula as a guide, because I think it's really important that we help parents understand that as a doula, that you're not there to replace the partner in any way. Do you want to talk more about a little bit more about that?
It's a common concern. It's something that question that I hear a lot, and can talk for a long time about that. But I feel, I'd never want to replace, I could never replace a partner. My goal is to be a doula for both mom and her partner, and I believe that they both need it, because for a dad, it's hugely important moment in their life too. They can't be objective. This is the two people they love the most, and it's also a lot to put on a partner to remember all that information and also to advocate for their partner and to know when to do that. A lot of people will have distrust for medical community or medical advice, and they don't know, what questions to ask. So my husband and I, we didn't have a doula for our twins' birth, and both of us just felt like it was such, like we didn't quite have all of our needs met. So, he just found so much relief in having that person not to take over his role, not to do what he's there to do to support me, but to help him do it as best as he can. And I just go back to that, what I said before about, it's good for a partner to be informed, but also best to know how to use that information. And think, I do that for those partners.
Sure. Another myth out there around doulas, or misconception around doulas, is that doulas are only for moms who are planning an unmedicated physiological birth. So
yes. Mm-hmm.
How would you answer that?
Well, I don't think it's true. I have clients who, I would say the majority of my clients are interested in an unmedicated birth, meaning no epidural. But not all of them end up having that kind of birth. And then I also do have some clients who are planning an epidural. Either way, it is a huge experience. Either way, you need support. Either way, or any way, there's lots of different ways to have a baby, but there are a lot of unknowns. Even if you are planning on an epidural, you're probably not going to get it right after the first contraction. You will probably be able to feel quite a bit of your labor and need support through that before you get an epidural. Afterwards, sometimes surprises can happen. Sometimes it doesn't work perfectly or as well as some moms expect. And then even if you can't feel your labor, there's a lot of unknowns that can still happen. It's still important to keep moving when even with an epidural. So I'm often helping my clients get into, often with the help of a nurse, change from side to side, try different positions, even hands and knees and squatting. So it's not like it's like now you're at a spa and are very comfortable. It's still a lot of work, and you can still benefit a lot from having a doula, even if you plan on using an epidural.
Even more so, I think, with an epidural, that I think there is this perception that I'll get my epidural and I'll lie in bed and just wait until this baby arrives. And, you've just described a couple of, other things can come up, because sometimes with an epidural, it causes a kind of a domino effect. And having a knowledgeable doula there to help you with position changes. I've had moms still have had good control of their legs. I've had moms in all fours and hands and knees, and it's so empowering for them to be able to change position and help their baby be born by using gravity, because I think that is one of the potential trade-offs of the epidural, is that you lose that mobility. Brenda, if I hired you to be my doula tomorrow, and let's say I'm due around Christmas, so hopefully you're available, what does it look like? How many prenatals do we have based on what your particular package is? And what do you cover in these meetings with your clients?
Well, I usually do 2 prenatal meetings. I like to do them around the first one around the end of the second trimester, and then the second one around 36 weeks. The first one, I kind of like to come with an agenda. I always have lots of questions for my clients, and, want to encourage them to, prior to meeting, I kind of send a questionnaire, kind of get to know them a little bit. In that first meeting, I like to go over writing a birth plan, though not all of my clients write one. It's whether they actually want a written birth plan or not. I still want to know what their preferences are, how strong their preferences are on a number of different things. And of course, the meetings are tailored to them specifically and what their concerns and desires are. So, a lot of questions will come up. I'll give them a lot of questions to ask their provider, and kind of, if they're nervous about, how do I ask that question, can kind of help them figure out kind of how to do that in a diplomatic way. And then I also, in that meeting, I like to give them a few suggestions on preparing for labor. Of course, if they're also taking gentle birth, that's quite easy. But if they're not, I give them a few suggestions on kind of how to practice relaxing and breathing and in visualizing their labor. I also like to give them a couple scenarios to think through, particularly what if your water breaks and labor isn't starting. Encourage them to think, and I also give them some information from evidence-based birth about that, because I want to avoid them being surprised and having to make a last-minute decision when they're stressed. And then the last meeting that I have, my second prenatal, we talk all about logistics. So like, what does early labor look like? What does my support look like in early labor? What do I want them to tell me? Like, I would definitely want to know if this happens, water breaks, contractions. And then we do a quick review of the stages of labor. Most of them have taken a childbirth ed class. And then we actually practice some comfort measures. So I show them some kind of common comfort measures and also some problem-solving techniques or stretches and exercises that we might use if labor is, stalled out or there's a positioning issue or something. Of course, it depends on what my client's particular individual needs are, but that's what we do prenatally.
And then in the postpartum period, do you see your clients after they've given birth?
Yes, I visit them just once within the first 2 weeks usually the first 2 weeks, process the birth. They usually like to kind of hear my perspective, talk about how breastfeeding's going if they're breastfeeding. And then I connect them with different groups or, other resources in the community that either are something's beyond my knowledge or scope.
When do people normally hire doulas? Do they hire them as soon as they find out they're pregnant, or when would you recommend is the best time to hire a doula?
Say on average, it's during the second trimester, maybe about halfway through, 5-6 months in, that most people will hire a doula. I have been a doula for, like I said, 5 years. So I have the privilege of, having repeat clients. One of my favorite things about this work, I tend to get hired when the stick is still wet with my repeat clients. Sometimes I can fill up far in advance. So I say that just because I don't think it's never too early to hire a doula. And I think the earlier you hire a doula, the more benefit that you can have. Because I do, my clients text me like a friend is what I tell them. If they have questions throughout their pregnancy, they can text me or call me, and can just the best way to take advantage of that investment and get the most out of your money for hiring your doula.
Can you tell us just some of there's a ton of really robust evidence for birth doulas and how it improves outcomes for families. Can you just quickly talk us through a couple of those, just so for parents who may not be aware of the research?
There have been, I'd like to say, even though doula doesn't provide clinical support, there are a lot of clinical benefits. So there's been numerous studies that have shown many clinical benefits. That includes significant decrease in the risk of cesarean, lower use of Pitocin, higher breastfeeding rates, less postpartum depression, less instrumental birth, so forceps or vacuum, higher APGAR scores for baby, which is, I suppose, not surprising. Well, I think it is kind of surprising. Maybe people don't realize the benefits for a baby. Significantly higher satisfaction with the experience of giving birth. And I always, obviously decreased C-section rates. Oh, also, I forgot to say, decreased maternal requests for pain medication. So obviously all of that is on paper, easy to see how beneficial that is. But I think some people like to dismiss the satisfaction, like increased satisfaction with the birthing experience, as like, oh, well, that's not that important. But I always say, it's not satisfaction of like having this spa-like experience where, you feel pampered, even though I think that's perfectly fine to feel pampered. But this experience, feeling satisfied with it, feeling like it was a positive experience, it influences your physical health, your mental health, and your bonding with your baby. And if that's not important, I don't know what is.
Penny Simpkin, one of the founding members of DONA International, he always talks about how we might not be able to control what happens in labor,
yeah,
but we can always control how we care for women in labor. And I think that's really, really important. And I think in the research as well, when moms look at satisfaction with the experience, it rarely comes down to pain relief or pain management, but how they were cared for, were they treated kindly and compassionately in this very stressful situation for most, especially for first-time moms, which is, I think, really important. But I agree, we think satisfaction, I guess we kind of think of like a satisfaction survey or something, but when moms feel really cared for and nurtured in labor, it definitely makes a difference in how they step into that role as a new mom.
Absolutely. And I've also seen that it's not contingent on how the baby is born and how much of their birth list or their birth preferences are checked off. I've had clients have everything go completely differently than what was their ideal. And while they may be disappointed about some of the circumstances, because of how they were treated, because they maintained their autonomy, because they were respected, because they were playing a very active role in decision making, have felt that it was still a very positive experience. So yes, that's so important.
Do you feel that providing unbiased information is important so that parents can make informed decisions? And is that something that your clients are interested in, that they can gather information to make informed decisions?
Yes, I think both. That's very important for me to provide high quality evidence-based information for my clients. I think a lot of them they're overwhelmed by everything, all the information that's out there. So they kind of like having a source that can kind of curate that information, and I can point them in a good direction where they can get good evidence-based information, or, even evidence straight from ACOG, American College of OBGYNs. And I know that's important to a lot of my clients.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to become a doula.
Sure. So this was, as is kind of typical in the field, not my original goal or original plans coming out of college. I was an elementary school teacher, like I mentioned. Like many other doulas, my path to this work started with my own birth experiences. I had a positive experience my first time around. I feel really lucky and thankful, but I was surprised by how transformative the process of giving birth was, and realized that I wanted to talk about it with everyone. I wanted to tell everyone about my birth experience. And I also noticed that everyone else felt the same way. But when I was pretty young, at least within my circles, when my boys were born. So after they were born, I struggled to, I felt like I was reinventing the wheel. I felt like I had to create my own path. I didn't have any peer support from friends who had children before me who could kind of guide me, if that makes sense. So I had to figure it all out all on my own, and it was a really big struggle. So then as people in my wider circle started having babies, I kept getting messages from them because I think I was the only mom a lot of people knew. So I really I discovered that I really loved to help these moms get their questions answered, or point them in a direction to help them, encourage them and get their questions answered. So there's also two big beliefs or problems that culturally that made a really big impression on me as a very, brand new mother. And neither of them, I'm sure, will be a surprise to a lot of the listeners or to you, Tracy, but one of them was the judgment about absolutely everything regarding pregnancy, birth, how you feed your baby, on and on and on until you die. And it was really hard for me to kind of figure out my own way of mothering, because there was this book that told me this, and if I didn't do it this way, I was going to screw up my kids forever. And then the other book that told me complete opposite. So I found it very overwhelming. And then also, of course, just the judgment between women about, pain medication, how you birth your baby, birth preferences. And I just felt it was absolutely unacceptable. I don't think there's any place for shame in childbirth or parenting choices. And I carry that with me with how I teach my classes and how I care for my clients. I tell them I don't want anything for them more than they want it for themselves. And I want, to support them in their decisions. So that kind of fighting against that harmful shame about parenting is a big motivating factor for me. Also, I know I could talk about this for a long time, but whenever anyone asks me, why did you become a doula? I'm like, I don't have 20 minutes. It's long. But the other big motivating belief, or I guess cultural problem for me, is how women are systematically dismissed, how their experiences and their health don't seem to matter. Before becoming a doula, I just noticed all these women sharing very difficult experiences where they were, either something really hard or scary happened, or they were treated poorly, and they and everyone around them would say, but a healthy baby is all that matters. And that made me very angry.
As it should, especially in today, when we look at health disparities especially in the USA, where it's a life-threatening, depending on if you're a woman of color, giving birth is dangerous for you based on the care levels that these women are receiving or not receiving.
Yes, absolutely. So, that, of course, I've never met a mother who wouldn't do anything necessary for her baby, and I think about it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The bottom of the pyramid is an alive mother and a live baby, but that doesn't mean it's the only thing that's important. Autonomy, trust, respect, care, even your, desires. Like if you want a vaginal birth and you don't have one, that still matters. It's still okay to be disappointed. We don't have to shove all of our feelings about our birth experiences into one feeling of being grateful for a healthy baby. We can be grateful for a healthy baby and confident in our choices, but also sad and disappointed in something too.
Sure.
So just that, looking at women as whole people and whole mothers, and at this huge life change as something so important, that it's so important for them and their family and their baby and bonding with their baby, that their needs are met and that they're respected and heard, so that helping my clients get those needs met is a big part of why I'm a doula too.
And I love that idea of, the whole mother. So this is not just a physical event that's happening, that we're looking at the bigger picture of the mom's, her spirituality, her emotional state, that I think we're at a point here in many areas of the developed world where we've just made birth about mechanics. And it's what's happening from the waist down, and we're not taking into account the bigger picture of the whole woman.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to any listeners who are out there now thinking, this sounds like amazing work? They're probably like yourself, they probably were doing it before they realized that this was actually a profession that they can train and be a part of. So what advice would you give to those listeners who are thinking, yes, this is exactly what I want to do?
First off, I would say do your research on certifying organization. I am a big believer in being certified. I think I've learned much more from my own work and my own experience than I did with my, initial training, like any training. But I think certification really helps with the profession. So do some research and kind of figure out where you want to go. But what I think what's really important, taking a certifying, workshop is relatively easy. When you think about training for compared to any other profession, compared to the work I put in college to be an elementary school teacher, it's a lot less to become certified as a doula. So I think some people can have the impression that it's an easy profession to get into. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a lot cheaper than college. It's a lot less time. However, it's a lot harder to become a successful doula than it is to become a certified doula, than it is to just take a training. So for anyone thinking about becoming a doula, I would just say plan on not just doula work, plan on a lot of business work.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Because I was just about to say, because I'm a DONA trainer myself, and I think that is one thing that I like to tell my doula students is that the training, the certification, it's enjoyable, but it's the beginning, and it's very much just a foundation for a lifelong learning. And always, again, do your research and find an organization whose values really resonate with your own. But a huge part of doula work is, unless you join an agency, is business work. So you have to know about marketing and networking, and that's a part that I think a lot of new doulas do struggle with and they need kind of that doulaing themselves to become successful, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yes, absolutely, and you're right about that. I think it's very important to have to have a professional, to plan on putting an investment into this business that you're starting. Not, mine has very low overhead, thankfully, and I think most do. But you do need a professional website, social media, in my opinion, and, professional materials. It is a lot of work to get started and get going, but it's possible for sure.
Yeah. But it's not just that financial investment and outlay for books and your studies, but the time investment and recurring time investment, because sometimes a doula can, take a training and they get certified and then they're just expecting clients just to show up at the door, which does happen when you've had some clients, and because word of mouth is so powerful in this work.
Yes.
But it's not an instant business. It does take hard graft and sometimes getting out of your comfort zone, and because I know people don't particularly like the idea of networking but putting yourself out there and meeting potential clients and getting out to as many events as you can with other doulas, other birth professionals, so that it's about building a business, and that can take time and effort, and not just time spent at networking. This time is also time spent away from your family. And one consideration that I encourage anyone who's thinking about becoming a doula is that the doula lifestyle is quite intense. Time, you can be gone to a birth for maybe 2 days, and you have to take into consideration if you have childcare needs, or the fact that when you come back from that birth that you've been at for 2 days, that you're going to need to sleep for a while. And really, like, self-care is not an option. Self-care is an absolute must, so that you can continue in this work and not burn out really quickly, as some doulas do when they just take on too much too soon and don't realize that it's not just about the business. It really is a particular lifestyle that you're entering into.
Yes, I don't think I'd be able to do this job without solid, dependable childcare. It's a lot easier now that my kids are in full-time school, all of them. But I have a neighbor and friend who has been she's a stay-at-home mom, and she's been doing my babysitting for me for several years, and I don't know what I would do, without her. But yeah, having solid childcare and backup doula too is super important. Also, I would say charging well, or charging what you're worth, or I would say charging enough to, building self-care into your fee is important. I plan on, if I have to, I will pay a sitter to watch my kids the next day, so that I can sleep when I get home at 7 a.m. and haven't slept all night. So that's very important.
Yeah, the on-call lifestyle is tough.
Yes. Yes, I have to. Another challenge for me is, having really firm boundaries. It's really hard for me it's really easy for me to overcommit myself. And it's very hard for me to say no to somebody who wants to hire me. But I, for a long time, have done 3 clients a month. And then, after doing that for a while, recently my husband and I were like, okay, we got to do 2, especially because I'm now doing my gentle birth classes. So that, of course, adds more. But I need to protect myself from burnout. And, I need to keep those boundaries. Even though it's so hard.
It's really important. And I think it's one of those things when it comes to boundaries and also the financial aspects to this work, is that sometimes it is a lived experience, and it's only when you have been taken advantage of, or you realize that it's actually costing you money to attend births and to do this work, that you have that kind of reality check and step back, hopefully be able to step back and kind of make some changes so that you can be successful emotionally and financially in this work. Brenda, if you had one book that you would recommend to someone who's considering becoming a doula, what would be that one book? Or is there one book that you've read that really influenced you to come into this work?
Well, I would think this is probably a very common answer, but Ina May's Guide to Childbirth.
Sure.
I had a friend, when I was planning for my daughter's birth, I went and visited a friend, and I remember I knew she had 2 unmedicated births. I had an planned epidural with my boys, and I wanted to go without for my daughter. And so I told her, I was like, I'm going to do it. And she was like, I've got the book for you. And she went inside and she grabbed Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and it was like falling apart. I think it was in 3 pieces because it was going from mother to mother to mother to mother. I don't know who I gave it to. I read it, and I really feel like it changed my life, because it changed the way I thought about my ability to give birth. I know that my birth experience with my daughter also influenced my decision to become a doula. I really, I will say to my clients, there will probably be at least one thing in this book that will be a little too much for you. You take what is for you and you leave the rest. Orgasmic birth might not be right for you. It might be, but it might not be. And that's okay. But I love it. I particularly her, when I teach my classes, I will actually say, like, I prepared myself with gentle birth before I even knew what gentle birth was, because I really did use a lot of the techniques, choosing to think, the intelligent optimism, choosing to think positively, choosing to believe that my brain was really powerful. Ina May has this chapter on the mind-body connection and all these amazing examples. And I remember I read this chapter and I was like, I don't care if this is total BS. I mean, I don't think it is, but I'm just going to take this and run with it. And the worst it's going to do is help me think more positively about my ability, help me stay calm, decrease my anxiety. Particularly that chapter really influenced me. So that's my answer to that question.
Great.
Yeah.
Brenda, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. And hopefully all of this information will help more parents consider having a doula, a birth doula with them at their baby's birth. And for anyone out there that's considering becoming a doula, that this has been helpful for them to, I guess, maybe look further into it and research options and hopefully join the ranks of doulas around the world that are helping more parents have much more positive birth.
It's been great. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
So tell us, just before we finish up, if you want to tell us a little bit about how our listeners in your community can reach you and your website and anything else you want to add.
I am on the web at brendabaar.com. First name spelled like normal. Last name is spelled 2 A's, 1 R, Baar. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at brendabaar.birth. And yeah, I'd love to connect.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. We'll include your contact details in the podcast information. Thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Tracy. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Brenda.